In some ways, she was very much a puzzle to me. Not that she herself was a particular mystery, quite the contrary. But it is the issue of moral judgment that defeats me. She was one of the 3 professors who got me kicked out of a graduate program at a certain university. Obviously, that means I'm not going to be impartial or even fair in my evaluation of her. Still, I'd like to think that I could, at least, see her point in the matter. Maybe even, if possible, make sense of her motives, and make sense of the woman herself, for that matter. Yet, I find this difficult. Why? Well, the other 2 professors in the clique, the ones who drove me out of the program, the older man who was a pompous ass, the younger woman who was, bluntly, a bitch, those 2 I sort of understood. Oh, I didn't like them. I thought they were stupid and cruel. But they made choices. Bad choices, in my opinion. Choices that harmed me, most certainly. But they took a position. They honestly declared themselves my enemies and acted accordingly. I knew where I stood with them. But her... She had been my major professor. For the first 2 years of my time at the university, she was quite good. She was a genuine mentor, an excellent friend. I did well in her classes. She accepted my dissertation proposal with real enthusiasm, and she read my first couple of chapters with what seemed to be actual pleasure. But then, just after I had passed the qualifying exam, I made some mistakes. Oh yes, I admit that. I screwed up. I offended some people I shouldn't have. It was stupid of me, but I'm as fallible as the next chap. And it was then that the 2 other professors of the clique, the man and the woman, decided they didn't care for me very much. Well, they had their reasons, maybe. I admit that too. What was the mystery was that then, in the span of a few hours, almost literally overnight, my major professor, my mentor, my former friend, became my fiercest critic, my least relenting foe. Of course, with no support, and with the department closing in on me like I don't know, like terriers on a rat, I had no choice but to jump before I was pushed. Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing. I'd already begun to suspect that I wasn't cut out for life in the academy, with its murderous office politics, and its obsession with what seems to me to be minutiae and jargon. Still, leaving the program caused me real harm, and I was confused by my former professor's clear indifference to that fact. Why, I wondered, after she'd been so supportive of me before, had she made the choice to abandon me to my fate? Only much, much later did I begin to form a tentative hypothesis. I began to suspect that she had not made the choice to abandon me, or rather, had not made any choice at all. That, in fact, she might never have made a choice in her life, if she could help it. As I looked back on her, as I remembered her behaviors as I'd seen them, I realized that she'd never taken a stand on anything, not in all the time I'd known her. Thus, for example, though she was an important member of the department, she'd always followed the leads of other faculty members in every major decision that I'd ever heard of. I realized she had always followed the course of least resistance. So, when I was first her student, it was simplest for her just to let me do what I wanted, write what I wanted. And afterwards, then she praised me for my scholarship, no matter, well, how good or bad it actually was. That way, she didn't have to make an effort. She didn't have to teach me anything. She didn't have to, take a stand. And then after that, when I ran afoul of the department, well, easiest to let me fall before the fury of the other professors. No heavy lifting required. So, after much reflection, and with no little amazement, I finally arrived at something like an explanation. To wit, she wasn't really there at all. She was instead a blank space, an absence of void, whose participation in my professional humiliation was kind of an accident, and certainly entirely passive. You see, I trust my difficulty here. If someone actively decides to harm you, well, if you are a normal human being, you may hate them. Or, if you're very noble and brave, you might forgive them. But what if your tormentor has actually made no choice? What if they simply drift into you, like the toxic jellyfish you encounter while swimming, and that without brain, without thought, scourges your flesh with dreadful venom? You feel agony. But really, can you hate the jelly? Or for that matter, granted pardon? No will accompanied the act. No thought preceded the pain. No choice was made. So, how do I deal with this? How do I understand the situation? How do I process her, this woman who works so hard not to be a woman? I mean, not to be a person at all. I do not know. I cannot say. But I will make a guess. Perhaps the way to respond to a voluntary non-entity, someone who does in effect nothing, is to do nothing in return. You do not respond to them. Not with hate, not with love, not with respect, not with anger. You feel nothing because they inspire nothing. And so, you simply walk away, as you would from a conversation with the wind in vacant desert places. For there is nothing to be gained by remaining, except dust and emptiness, and maybe even just a little danger. For nature, as you know, abhors above all else a vacuum.